Leaving no trace, the Mafia Boss built a secret house inside a tree trunk in the forest alone. That sentence sounds impossible, like something from a fever dream or a story told around a campfire to frighten children. But I watched it happen. I watched a man disappear from the world he had conquered, and I followed him into the silence of the trees, into a life I never could have imagined. My name is Eleanor, and this is the story of how I found sanctuary in the most unlikely place on earth, hidden inside the heartwood of an ancient oak, protected by a man whose hands had once commanded empires, but now carved a home from bark and shadow. The rain came without warning that October night in Chicago. I remember standing at the window of my small apartment on the south side, watching the streets flood with water that reflected the orange glow of streetlights. My hands were shaking. They had been shaking for 3 days, ever since I found the envelope slipped under my door with photographs inside. Photographs of me at work, photographs of me at the grocery store, photographs of my daughter, Sophie, walking home from school. Sophie was only 7 years old. She had her father's dark eyes and my stubborn chin, and she was sleeping in the next room unaware that our lives were about to shatter. I had made a mistake. That was what they called it when you witnessed something you were never supposed to see. I was a night shift nurse at Mercy General, and I had walked into the wrong room at the wrong moment. I saw faces I recognized from the news. I saw money changing hands. I saw the fear in the eyes of the hospital administrator as he realized I was standing in the doorway. 3 days later, my car was vandalized. The next day, strange men appeared on my block watching, and then came the photographs. I called the police. They took my statement, looked at the pictures, and told me they would increase patrols in my neighborhood. But I saw the way they glanced at each other when I mentioned the names I had recognized. I saw the hesitation. I knew then that I was on my own. That was when I remembered Marcus. Marcus was not a friend. He was barely an acquaintance. He was a patient I had treated 2 years earlier, a man who had been brought into the emergency room with 3 gunshots in his chest and a look in his eyes that told me he had seen death so many times it no longer frightened him. I saved his life that night. I worked for 6 hours straight, monitoring his vitals, holding pressure on wounds, doing everything in my power to keep his heart beating until the surgeons could take over. When he woke up 3 days later, he looked at me with those storm-grey eyes and said only 2 words. "Thank you." I never saw him again. But a month later, I received a package at my apartment. Inside was a single white card with a phone number written in elegant script, and beneath it, a simple message. "If you ever need help, call this number." No questions asked. I had kept that card in my jewelry box for 2 years, never believing I would use it. But now, with the rain pounding against my window, and my daughter sleeping in the next room, and danger closing in from every direction, I reached for it with trembling fingers. The phone rang twice before someone answered. A woman's voice, calm and professional. "I need to speak to Marcus," I said. There was a pause, then, "Hold, please." The silence stretched for nearly a minute. When the line connected, again it was not the woman's voice I heard. It was deeper, rougher, a voice I remembered from a hospital bed 2 years ago. "Elena," he said. My heart stopped at the sound of my name in his mouth. I did not know he remembered it. "I need help," I whispered. "Please." "They are watching my apartment. They have photographs of my daughter. I do not know where else to turn." Another pause. Then, "Where are you now?" "Home, South Side, the corner of Halstead and 63rd. Do not leave. Do not turn on any lights. In 15 minutes, a black car will pull up to your building. Get your daughter and whatever you can carry in one bag. Do not bring your phone. Do you understand?" "Yes," I breathed. The line went dead. I moved through my apartment like a ghost, gathering essentials by the glow of the streetlights filtering through my windows. Clothes for Sophie, her favorite stuffed rabbit, our passports, the emergency cash I kept hidden in a coffee can in the back of my pantry. My hands were still shaking. But something had shifted inside me. I had made a choice. I had stepped off the edge of my old life, and now I was falling into the unknown. I woke Sophie gently, pressing my hand over her mouth before she could cry out. "Baby," I whispered, "we are going on an adventure. You have to be very quiet, okay? Like a little mouse." She nodded, her dark eyes wide with confusion, but trusting me completely. That trust broke my heart and strengthened it at the same time. 14 minutes later, I saw headlights cut through the rain. A black sedan pulled to the curb, its windows dark. I grabbed our bag, took Sophie's hand, and walked out into the storm. The back door opened from the inside. A man I did not recognize sat behind the wheel, his face illuminated briefly by the dashboard lights. He did not speak. He only nodded toward the back seat. I climbed in with Sophie on my lap, and the car began to move before I had even closed the door. We drove for what felt like hours. Through the city, then onto highways, then smaller roads that wound through darkness so complete I could not tell where we were. Sophie fell asleep against my chest, her breathing slow and even, her small fingers clutching her rabbit. I held her close and watched the rain streak across the windows and tried to imagine what awaited us at the end of this journey. Near dawn, we turned onto a gravel road that seemed to lead nowhere. Trees pressed close on both sides, their branches reaching toward the car like skeletal fingers. The driver slowed, navigated a series of turns that felt deliberate and confusing, and finally stopped in a clearing. "Wait here," he said. Those were the first words he had spoken all night. He stepped out of the car and disappeared into the trees. I could see nothing beyond the glow of the headlights, nothing but darkness and rain and the endless forest stretching in every direction. Then I saw movement. A figure emerged from the shadows, tall and broad, wearing a dark coat that glistened with moisture. He walked toward the car with the unhurried confidence of a man who owned everything around him, and when he reached my window, he leaned down and looked at me through the glass. Marcus. His face was harder than I remembered. There were new lines around his eyes, new shadows in the hollows of his cheeks, but those eyes were the same. Grey as winter storms, sharp as surgical steel, and somehow, impossibly, warm when they met mine. He opened my door. The rain immediately soaked my hair, my clothes, but I did not care. "You came," I said. "I always pay my debts," he replied. Then his gaze dropped to Sophie, still sleeping in my arms. He studied her for a long moment, and something shifted in his expression. Something softened. "Come," he said. "We have a long walk ahead. Check if you are already subscribed to this channel. If you have been moved by stories of unexpected courage and hidden hearts, if you believe that love can bloom in the most unlikely places, then join this family and never miss another journey into the extraordinary." I thought Marcus was leading me to a cabin, perhaps a hunting lodge hidden in the woods, or a compound surrounded by guards and fences. I was prepared for concrete and steel, for the trappings of power that men like Marcus usually surrounded themselves with. I was not prepared for what I actually saw. We walked for nearly 20 minutes through the forest, following a path that was invisible to my untrained eyes, but perfectly clear to Marcus. He carried Sophie now, cradling her against his chest as if she weighed nothing, and she had not even stirred when he lifted her from my arms. The rain had slowed to a gentle drizzle, and the first grey light of dawn was beginning to filter through the canopy above. Then Marcus stopped. He turned to me and pointed. "Home," he said. I followed his gesture and saw nothing. Just trees. Giant oaks and maples, their trunks thick with age, their branches interlocking. Overhead like the vaulted ceiling of a cathedral. I blinked, looked again, and still saw nothing. "Where?" I asked. He smiled. It was the first time I had ever seen him smile, and it transformed his entire face. "Look closer," he said. I stepped forward, squinting through the dim light, and then I saw it. One of the oaks, larger than the rest, with a trunk that must have been 15 feet in diameter. Its bark was gnarled and weathered, covered in moss and lichen, indistinguishable from any other ancient tree in the forest. But as I looked more closely, I noticed something strange, a shadow that was too dark, a line that was too straight. Marcus walked to the tree and pressed his hand against a section of bark. There was a soft click, and a door swung inward, revealing a space beyond. I stood frozen, my breath caught in my throat. The inside of the tree trunk had been hollowed out and transformed into a living space. Not a cramped, primitive shelter, but a genuine home. The walls were smooth wood, polished to a golden sheen. A spiral staircase wound upward, disappearing into the darkness above. Soft light glowed from fixtures that looked like natural formations of bioluminescent moss, but were clearly something more sophisticated. "How?" I whispered. Marcus stepped inside, still carrying Sophie, and gestured for me to follow. 18 months, he said. I built it with my own hands. No contractors, no witnesses, no record that this place exists. I climbed through the doorway and felt the warmth envelop me immediately. Despite the October chill outside, the interior of the tree was comfortable, almost cozy. I looked around in wonder at the impossible space. The ground level was a combination living area and kitchen. The furniture was handmade, carved from the same golden wood as the walls, with cushions upholstered in earth-toned fabrics. A small stove sat in one corner, its chimney disappearing into the trunk above, in a way that must have dispersed the smoke through the branches to avoid detection. Shelves lined the curved walls, holding books, supplies, and small personal items that suggested this was not just a hideout, but a true home. "Come," Marcus said. "Let me show you where the little one will sleep." He led me up the spiral staircase, which wound through the hollow trunk like the inside of a nautilus shell. The second level was divided into 2 bedrooms, small but perfectly formed, with built-in beds and windows that I realized were cleverly disguised, knotholes in the bark, allowing light to enter while remaining invisible from outside. Marcus laid Sophie gently on one of the beds, pulling a thick blanket over her sleeping form. She murmured something, clutched her rabbit tighter, and settled deeper into the mattress. "She will be safe here," Marcus said quietly. "No one will find her. No one will find either of you." I turned to look at him, this man who had built an impossible sanctuary in the heart of a forest, who had carved a home from living wood with his own hands, who had answered my desperate call without hesitation. "Why?" I asked. "Why did you do all this?" He was silent for a long moment, his gaze fixed on Sophie's sleeping face. "I spent 30 years building an empire," he finally said. "I commanded thousands of men. I owned properties on 4 continents. I could have anything I wanted with a single phone call. And none of it meant anything." He turned to face me, and I saw something in his eyes I had never expected to see. Weariness. Not physical exhaustion, but the soul-deep fatigue of a man who had carried too much for too long. 2 years ago, I was lying on a hospital bed with death knocking at my door, and you stayed with me through the night. You talked to me. You told me about your daughter, about your dreams, about the things that mattered to you, and I realized that everything I had built was hollow. I had power, but no peace. I had wealth, but no warmth. I had conquered the world, but never found a home. He gestured at the walls surrounding us. So I walked away. I left everything behind. I came here to these woods that have been in my family for generations, and I built something real, something that could not be taken from me, something that existed only because I created it with my own hands, my own sweat, my own vision. "You gave up everything?" I asked. "I gave up nothing that mattered," he replied, "and I gained something I had never had before. Silence, peace, the chance to start again." I looked around at the impossible home carved from the heart of a tree, at this man who had traded an empire for solitude, and I felt something shift inside me. For the first time in weeks, my hands were not shaking. "We are safe here," I said. It was not a question. Marcus nodded. "You are safe here," he confirmed, "for as long as you need. No one knows about this place. No one can find it. The forest will protect you, and so will I." I wanted to ask more questions. I wanted to understand how he had done it, why he had chosen this path, what it meant that he had brought us here. But exhaustion was pulling at me, and Sophie was sleeping peacefully for the first time in days, and the warmth of the tree was seeping into my bones. "Rest," Marcus said, as if reading my thoughts. "We will talk more tomorrow. There is time now." There is nothing but time. He descended the staircase, leaving me alone in the bedroom with my sleeping daughter. I lay down beside her, pulled her close, and listened to the rain, pattering against the bark outside, muffled and distant, like a lullaby sung by the forest itself. For the first time in weeks, I slept without fear. Days passed in that hidden sanctuary, each one blending into the next, like the rings of the tree that sheltered us. I learned the rhythms of life inside the ancient oak, the routines that Marcus had developed over 18 months of solitary existence. He rose before dawn each day, descending from his bedroom on the 3rd level to kindle the fire, in the small stove. By the time Sophie and I emerged from sleep, the main living area was warm and fragrant with the smell of coffee and whatever breakfast he had prepared. Eggs from a hen house hidden a quarter-mile away, fresh bread baked in a clay oven he had built into a hillside, fruit preserved from the previous summer's harvest. Everything about our existence was designed for invisibility. Marcus had thought of every detail, every contingency, every possible way we might be discovered. The chimney smoke dispersed through the branches, mixing with morning mist until it was indistinguishable from natural vapor. The garbage was composted or buried. The water came from a spring that Marcus had channeled through an underground system of pipes carved from bamboo. Even our footpaths changed regularly, preventing any visible trails from forming in the undergrowth. But what struck me most was not the technical ingenuity of the place. It was the beauty of it. Marcus had not simply built a shelter. He had created something extraordinary, a work of art hidden in the heart of the forest. The walls were decorated with carvings he had made during long winter nights, leaves and animals and abstract patterns that caught the light and seemed to move when you looked at them from different angles. The furniture was not just functional but elegant, each piece shaped with care and attention that revealed a skill I never would have expected from a man whose hands had once commanded violence. "You made all of this?" I asked him one morning, running my fingers along the carved armrest of a chair. He nodded, his attention focused on the pan of eggs he was preparing. "It gives me something to do with my hands, something constructive instead of destructive." Sophie had adjusted to our new life with the resilience that only children possess. Within a week, she was exploring the forest under Marcus's careful supervision, learning to identify edible plants and animal tracks and the calls of different birds. She called him Mr. Tree Man, and the name made him laugh, a sound I heard more often as the days passed. One evening, while Sophie was drawing pictures at the small table Marcus had built for her, I found him on the platform he had constructed high in the branches of the oak. A ladder led up from the 3rd-level bedroom, emerging onto a hidden observation deck that offered a view of the forest stretching in every direction, an endless sea of green and gold. I climbed up to join him, settling onto the bench beside him as the sun began to set. "Tell me what you are thinking," I said. He was quiet for a long moment, his grey eyes scanning the horizon. "I am thinking about the men who are looking for you," he finally said. "I made some calls, discreet inquiries through channels that cannot be traced back here. What you saw at that hospital, it goes deeper than you realized. Money laundering on a massive scale. Politicians, businessmen, law enforcement, the people who want to silence you. They have resources I did not anticipate." I felt the familiar tightness in my chest, the fear that had become my constant companion. "What does that mean for us?" I asked. "It means we stay hidden," Marcus replied. "For now, at least. Until I can find a way to dismantle their network, to make it safe for you to return to the world." I looked out at the forest, at the shadows lengthening between the trees, at the sky turning from gold to amber to deep purple. "What if I do not want to return?" I asked quietly. He turned to look at me, surprise flickering across his features. "I spent 30 years building a life that made me miserable," I continued, "working double shifts at a hospital that did not value me, coming home to an empty apartment, watching Sophie grow up in a city that felt more dangerous every year. And now I am here, in this impossible place, and for the first time I can remember, I feel peaceful." Marcus did not respond immediately. He seemed to be processing my words, weighing them against something inside himself. "This life is not easy," he finally said. "The winters are harsh. The isolation is profound. There are days when the silence feels like it might swallow you whole." "I know," I said, "but I have been drowning in noise my whole life. Maybe what I need is silence." He looked at me then, really looked at me, and I felt something pass between us. Not romance, not attraction, at least not yet. Something deeper. Recognition. Two people who had been running from the same emptiness, who had found shelter in the same impossible place. "If you choose to stay," Marcus said slowly, "you should know what that means. I am not the man I used to be. I have tried to leave that life behind. But the past has a way of following you no matter how far you run. There may come a day when my enemies find this place, when I have to become what I was to protect what I have built." "I understand," I said. "Do you?" he asked. "Do you understand what I am capable of?" I thought about the night we first met, when I watched his vitals stabilize as surgeons extracted bullets from his body. I thought about the hardness in his eyes, the controlled power in his movements, the way his men had obeyed his instructions without question. "I know who you were," I said, "but I also see who you are becoming. A man who builds instead of destroys. A man who carves beauty from living wood. A man who teaches my daughter to identify birdsong and bakes bread at dawn. That is the man I see. That is the man I choose to trust." Something shifted in his expression. Something softened. "Then stay," he said, "for as long as you want, for as long as it feels right." This home was built for solitude, but maybe it was also waiting for something more. Maybe it was waiting for a family. If you are feeling moved by this story, leave a comment right now with the words, "I found my shelter." I want to see how many of us are building homes in unexpected places, finding peace in the heart of the storm. Autumn deepened into winter. The forest transformed around us, leaves falling like golden rain until the trees stood bare and skeletal against the grey sky. Snow came in December, blanketing the world in white silence, and our hidden home became even more invisible, just another mound of snow-covered bark among thousands of others. Sophie thrived in ways I never could have imagined. She learned to read tracks in the snow, to identify the difference between deer and rabbit, and fox. She helped Marcus tend the greenhouse he had built into a south-facing hillside, growing vegetables even in the depths of winter. She began to lose the nervous energy that had always buzzed beneath her surface in the city, replaced by a calm confidence that made my heart swell with gratitude. And Marcus became something I had not expected. A friend, a partner, a presence that filled the spaces in my life I had not even realized were empty. We talked for hours each evening after. Sophie went to bed, sharing stories of our past lives, our dreams, our fears. He told me about his childhood in Sicily, about a father who taught him that power was the only protection against a cruel world, about a mother who died when he was 12 and left him with no one to soften his father's lessons. He told me about the empire he had built, the things he had done that haunted him still, the moment when he realized that he had become everything he once hated. And I told him about my own journey, about my husband who had died in a car accident when Sophie was only 2, about the years of struggling to survive as a single mother, working endless shifts to pay for an apartment in a neighborhood that felt less safe every year, about the loneliness that had become so familiar I had stopped recognizing it as pain. We grew closer day by day in ways that felt both natural and miraculous. He taught me to carve wood, guiding my hands as I shaped my first clumsy spoon from a block of maple. I taught him the basics of emergency medicine, knowledge he said he wished he had possessed years ago. Together, we read books aloud to Sophie, cooked meals in our tiny kitchen, played board games by candlelight while snow piled against the bark outside. The first time he kissed me, it was New Year's Eve. Sophie was asleep upstairs, and we were sitting by the fire, watching the flames dance behind the glass of the stove door. Midnight approached, and Marcus turned to look at me with an expression I had never seen on his face before: vulnerability, hope. "Happy New Year, Elena," he said softly. "Happy New Year, Marcus," I replied. And then his hand was cupping my cheek, his thumb brushing across my cheekbone, and his lips were on mine, gentle and questioning and impossibly tender. It was not a kiss of passion, not yet. It was a question, a possibility, a door opening onto a future neither of us had dared to imagine. When we finally pulled apart, I found myself smiling. "So," I said, "is this part of the home you built?" He smiled back, that rare expression that still surprised me every time I saw it. "I think," he said, "it might be the most important part." Winter passed slowly but sweetly. Sophie learned to ski on the gentle slopes behind our tree, using equipment Marcus had somehow acquired without leaving any trace. I learned to preserve food for the spring thaw, to maintain the complicated water system, to read the weather in the patterns of clouds and the behavior of animals. And every night Marcus and I grew closer. We shared a bed now, his warmth surrounding me as we fell asleep to the sound of wind in the branches above. We talked about the future, about what might happen when summer returned, about whether we might venture further into the world or stay hidden forever in our forest sanctuary. But the world had not forgotten us. I knew that, and I knew that eventually it would come looking. It happened in late February, when the first hints of spring were beginning to soften the edges of winter. Marcus had gone to check his perimeter sensors, a network of hidden cameras and tripwires that would alert us to any intrusion. He returned with a face like stone. "Someone has been asking questions," he said, "in the nearby towns, showing photographs, looking for a woman with a young daughter." I felt the fear return, cold and familiar, wrapping around my heart. "How close are they?" I asked. "Not close yet, but getting closer. It is only a matter of time, before they narrow the search to this region. What do we do?" Marcus was silent for a long moment. Then he looked at me with an expression that made my breath catch. "We have two choices," he said. "We can run, find another hiding place, keep moving until they lose the trail, or we can end this, permanently." I understood what he meant. I saw the old Marcus in his eyes, the man who had commanded an empire, the man who knew how to make problems disappear forever. "What would that involve?" I asked. Quietly, Marcus shook his head. "It does not matter. I will not ask you to carry that weight. I will not ask Sophie to grow up in the shadow of what I might have to do. Then what do you suggest?" He reached out and took my hands in his. "We wait," he said. "We prepare. And we trust that the home I built will protect us. They do not know about this place. They cannot know. No one living except me has ever stepped foot inside this tree until you and Sophie arrived. We are invisible here, Elena. We just have to stay that way until the search moves on. And if it does not move on, then we face it together," he said. "Whatever comes, we face it as a family." I squeezed his hands, drawing strength from his certainty. "Together," I repeated, "as a family." Spring arrived in a rush of green and gold. The snow melted, the birds returned, and the forest came alive with sound and motion after months of white silence. Sophie practically vibrated with excitement, spending every daylight hour exploring the newly revealed landscape, cataloguing the wildflowers that sprouted in meadows and the baby animals that appeared in burrows and nests. But beneath the surface beauty of the season, tension hummed like a wire stretched too tight. Marcus spent long hours at his observation post, scanning the forest with binoculars, monitoring his sensor network, making occasional encrypted calls that left his face drawn and worried. "They are getting closer," he told me one evening in April. "They have narrowed the search to a 50-mile radius. They know you are somewhere in these woods. How much time do we have? Weeks, maybe less. They are bringing in professionals now, trackers, former military, the kind of men who do not give up." I looked out the small window at the forest that had become our world, at the trees that had sheltered us through the long winter, and I felt a fierce determination rise in my chest. "This is our home," I said. "We are not leaving." Marcus looked at me with something like wonder in his eyes. "You would fight for this place?" he asked. "I would fight for you," I said. "For Sophie, for the life we have built here. This tree, these woods, they are ours now. I will not let anyone take them from us." He crossed the room and pulled me into his arms, holding me tight against his chest. "I have never had anyone willing to fight for me before," he murmured into my hair. "Then it is about time you did," I replied. The next weeks were a blur of preparation. Marcus taught me to use the security systems, to read the sensor alerts, to move through the forest without leaving tracks. He showed me hidden routes and emergency caches, places where supplies were buried for contingencies he had hoped would never arise. Sophie knew something was happening, but we did not burden her with the full weight of it. She continued her explorations, her lessons, her joyful immersion in the natural world, while Marcus and I prepared for the possibility of invasion. It came on a grey morning, in May, when fog hung thick between the trees and visibility was reduced to a few dozen yards. The sensor alert chimed softly, and Marcus immediately tensed. "Motion on the eastern perimeter," he said quietly. "Multiple contacts. Moving in formation." He turned to me with an expression I had never seen before, not fear, something harder, something resolved. "Take Sophie to the shelter," he said. "You know where. Stay there until I come for you. If I do not come by sunset, use the escape route. There is a contact in the town 30 miles north who will help you disappear." "Marcus," I started. He cut me off with a kiss, fierce and desperate, and full of everything we had not yet said to each other. "I love you," he breathed against my lips. "I should have told you sooner. I should have told you every day since you arrived. I love you, Elena, you and Sophie. You are my family. You are the home I spent my whole life searching for." Tears streamed down my face. "I love you too," I whispered. "Come back to me. Promise me you will come back." He smiled, that rare, precious expression I had come to treasure. "I built this home with my own hands," he said. "I'm not about to let anyone take it from me." Then he was gone, slipping through the door and into the fog, silent as a shadow. I did as he asked. I woke Sophie gently, told her we were playing a special hiding game, and led her to the underground shelter Marcus had excavated beneath a fallen log 100 yards from our tree. We huddled together in the darkness, listening to the sounds of the forest above. Hours passed. I heard nothing. No gunshots, no shouting, nothing to indicate what was happening in the world beyond our hiding place. Sophie eventually fell asleep in my lap, exhausted by the tension she could feel even if she did not understand it. The sun was beginning to set, painting the sky visible through tiny ventilation holes in colors of orange and purple, when I finally heard footsteps approaching. My heart stopped. My hand tightened on the weapon Marcus had given me, a small but deadly thing I had hoped I would never have to use. The cover of the shelter lifted, and I raised the weapon, ready to defend my daughter with everything I had. Eleanor. Marcus's face appeared above me, dirty and exhausted but whole, unharmed. "It is over," he said. "They will not bother us again." I scrambled up from the shelter, pulling him into an embrace so fierce I felt his ribs creak. "What happened?" I demanded. He helped me lift Sophie out, cradling her sleeping form against his shoulder. "I will tell you everything," he said. "But first, let me take our daughter home." Our daughter. The words wrapped around my heart like a promise. We walked back to our tree through the fading light of evening, and Marcus told me what had happened. He had not confronted the intruders directly. Instead, he had used his knowledge of the forest, his 18 months of preparation, to lead them in circles. He had triggered false alarms, created phantom trails, manipulated their tracking equipment until they were hopelessly confused and demoralized. And then he had made contact with old allies, men who owed him debts, men who still had power in the world he had left behind. He had called in favors he had been saving for an emergency, and within hours the men searching for us had received new orders. "Stand down. Forget. Move on." "The people who wanted you silenced have been neutralized," Marcus explained as we climbed back into our home. "Not harmed, just defanged. Evidence has been delivered to the right authorities, federal agents who cannot be bribed, prosecutors who cannot be threatened. By this time next month, the people who forced you to run will be facing charges they cannot escape." "You did all that?" I asked in wonder. "Without violence?" He smiled wearily. I told you I was trying to become a different kind of man. Today I proved to myself that I could. I pulled him close, breathing in the scent of pine and sweat and something that was purely Marcus. You saved us, I whispered. We saved each other, he corrected. The moment you answered my call for help 2 years ago, you showed me that another kind of life was possible. You gave me hope, Elena, and hope is what allowed me to build all of this. He gestured at the walls surrounding us, at the home carved from the heart of a living tree. I built this place as a refuge from the world, he said, but I understand now that I was really building it for you. For Sophie, for the family I never knew I wanted until I found you. A year has passed since that fog-shrouded morning when Marcus defended our home without raising a hand in violence. The seasons have cycled through their eternal rhythm. Summer gave way to autumn. Autumn surrendered to winter. Winter thawed into spring, and now summer has returned, painting the forest in 1,000 shades of green. Sophie is 9 years old now. She reads voraciously, writes stories in journals Marcus makes for her, from handmade paper, and knows more about the natural world than most adults ever learn. She calls Marcus Papa, a name he accepted with tears in his eyes the first time she used it. I am a different woman than the one who fled Chicago in a rainstorm with her daughter clutched in her arms. Stronger, calmer, more certain of who I am and what I want from life. The fear that was my constant companion for so many years has faded to a distant memory, replaced by a peace I once thought impossible. Marcus and I were married in the spring, in a small ceremony in a meadow a mile from our tree. Sophie served as flower girl and ring bearer and witness all at once. An old friend of Marcus's officiated, a man who had traveled a long way to see the impossible with his own eyes, the fearsome boss who had walked away from everything, living in a tree with a nurse and her daughter, building a family from scratch. The legal troubles that forced me into hiding have been resolved. The men who threatened me are in prison now, their network dismantled, their power broken. I could return to the city if I wanted. I could reclaim my old life, my old job, my old apartment on the south side. I have no desire to do so. This forest has become my home in ways I cannot fully explain. The tree that shelters us feels less like a hiding place now and more like a sanctuary I have chosen, a life I have built with my own hands alongside the man I love. Marcus has continued to expand and improve our home. The tree now contains 4 levels, including a library that wraps around the trunk like a wooden embrace, and a workshop where he teaches Sophie to carve. He has built outbuildings scattered through the forest, always hidden, always invisible. A proper bathhouse fed by hot springs he discovered the first summer. A pottery studio where I have learned to throw clay. A schoolhouse where Sophie studies during the winters. We are not entirely cut off from the world. Marcus maintains careful connections with trusted contacts who keep us informed and supplied. We have solar power now, hidden panels scattered across the canopy above. We have internet access, carefully anonymized and encrypted, allowing Sophie to learn and grow and stay connected with the knowledge of the wider world. But we choose to stay here, in our impossible home, in the heart of a forest that has become as much a member of our family as any of us. Some evenings, after Sophie has gone to bed, Marcus and I climb to the observation platform high in the branches of our tree and watch the stars emerge one by one in the darkening sky. We talk about the past, about the future, about the life we have created against all odds. Do you ever regret it? I asked him recently. Giving up everything you had? He was quiet for a moment, his arm wrapped around my shoulders, his warmth seeping into me. I gave up power, he finally said. Wealth, influence, the ability to command men and shape events. But I gained something, infinitely more valuable. I gained a family, I gained a home, I gained love. He turned to look at me, his grey eyes soft in the starlight. I spent 30 years building an empire that crumbled the moment I stopped maintaining it, he continued. But this home, this family, this love, it does not require my constant vigilance to survive. It grows stronger every day, all on its own, fed by nothing but our presence and our care. That is the difference between power and meaning. Power must be defended. Meaning simply is. I leaned into him, feeling the truth of his words settle into my bones. I never thought I would find peace, I admitted. After everything that happened, after all the fear and the running and the uncertainty, I thought I would always be looking over my shoulder, always waiting for the next disaster to strike. And now, he asked. Now I understand that peace is not the absence of danger, I said. It is the presence of love. It is knowing that whatever comes, I will not face it alone. That is what you gave me, Marcus. That is what this home means. He kissed me gently, the way he always did now, with tenderness rather than urgency, with certainty rather than desperation. We built this together, he murmured against my lips. You and me and Sophie. This tree, this forest, this life. It belongs to all of us. I smiled, pulling back to look at the impossible structure that surrounded us. A home carved from the heart of a living tree. A sanctuary built by a man who walked away from an empire, a family forged in the most unlikely circumstances imaginable. Leaving no trace, I said softly, remembering the words that had once described this place. The Mafia Boss built a secret house inside a tree trunk in the forest alone. Marcus laughed, that warm, rich sound that still surprised me every time I heard it. Not alone anymore, he corrected, and never again. If you have watched this far, it is because you liked this story. Leave a comment saying I have watched this far so I can get to know you and see who really enjoys the stories here on the channel. Give this video a like if it touched your heart, and share it with someone who needs to believe in the possibility of transformation, in the power of love to build homes in the most impossible places. Subscribe so you never miss another journey into the extraordinary. And remember, no matter how dark the forest seems, there is always a shelter waiting to be discovered, built by hands that chose to create instead of destroy, filled with love that chose to protect instead of harm. Until next time, may you find your own sanctuary, your own peace, your own home in the heart of whatever wilderness surrounds you. The morning after our first wedding anniversary, I woke to find Marcus already gone from our bed. This was not unusual. He often rose before dawn to check the perimeter, to tend the animals, to lose himself in whatever project currently occupied his restless hands. But something felt different this morning. The quality of the light, perhaps, or the unusual silence from the forest outside. I dressed quickly and descended the spiral staircase to find Sophie at the kitchen table, a conspiratorial smile on her face. "Papa says you should come outside," she announced. "He says to follow the blue ribbons." I raised an eyebrow but did not ask questions. In the year since we had become a family, I had learned that Marcus loved surprises, almost as much as he loved building things. The combination often led to unexpected adventures. Outside, the forest sparkled with early morning dew. True to Sophie's words, a trail of small blue ribbons had been tied to branches and bushes, leading away from our tree in a direction I rarely walked. I followed them through stands of maple and oak, past the hidden chicken coop, across a stream swollen with spring melt, deeper into the woods than I usually ventured alone. The ribbons ended at a clearing I had never seen before, and in the center of that clearing stood a structure that took my breath away. It was another treehouse, but completely different from our primary home. Where our oak was ancient and massive, this was built among a cluster of younger maples, their trunks woven together by some miracle of patient engineering. The house itself was lighter, more open, with large windows that caught the morning sun and walls that seemed to blend seamlessly into the surrounding forest. Marcus stood on the porch, watching my approach, with barely contained excitement. "Happy anniversary," he said. "What is this?" I breathed. He smiled and extended his hand, helping me up the steps and through the front door. The interior was a single large room, but what a room! Floor-to-ceiling windows on 3 sides offered views of the forest canopy stretching to the horizon. A massive fireplace dominated one wall, its chimney disappearing into the branches above. The furniture was Marcus's work, I could tell immediately, but more refined than anything he had made before. Curved lines that echoed the natural shapes of the trees, cushions in colors drawn from the surrounding forest. A bed large enough for our entire family, positioned to catch the first light of dawn. I built our first home as a refuge, Marcus explained, his arm around my waist as I took in the impossible beauty surrounding us. A place to hide from the world. But I built this home as a celebration, a place to welcome the life we have chosen. He turned me to face him, his grey eyes soft with emotion. We do not have to hide anymore, Elena. The people who threatened you are gone. The danger has passed. We stay in the forest now not because we must, but because we choose to. And I wanted to give you a home that reflects that choice, not a shelter, not a fortress, a sanctuary we built together, filled with light and air and the beauty of the world we have claimed as our own. Tears streamed down my face as I pulled him into an embrace. "It is perfect," I whispered. "It is absolutely perfect." We spent the day exploring every corner of the new house, discovering the clever touches Marcus had incorporated. A rope bridge connecting to our original tree, allowing us to move between homes without touching the ground. A rainwater collection system that fed a bath overlooking the eastern horizon. A workshop for me, fully equipped for whatever projects I wanted to pursue. A bedroom for Sophie when she was old enough to want her own space. That evening, as the sun set and painted the sky in colors no artist could capture, we gathered on the porch of our new home, Marcus, Sophie and I, watching the world transform around us. "This is what I always dreamed of," Sophie said quietly. "When I was little and scared all the time. I used to imagine living in a treehouse in a magic forest where nothing bad could ever happen. I thought it was just a story. I did not know it could be real." Marcus pulled her close, kissing the top of her head. "Everything real started. Has a story first," he said. "Someone had to imagine it before someone could build it. That is the secret the world does not want you to know. The things you dream about are not impossible. They are just waiting for someone brave enough to make them true." I watched my husband and my daughter silhouetted against the sunset, and I felt a fullness in my chest that defied description. Gratitude, wonder, love so vast it seemed to encompass the entire forest. We had run from danger and found safety. We had fled from fear and discovered peace. We had escaped from lives that were slowly destroying us and built something beautiful in the heart of the wilderness, leaving no trace. That was what Marcus had wanted when he built his first home in the hollow of an ancient oak, to disappear from a world that had brought him nothing but violence and emptiness, to vanish into the forest and never be found. But he had been found. We had found each other, and in finding each other, we had discovered that the point was never to leave no trace. The point was to leave traces that mattered: love, family, a home carved from living wood, a daughter who believed in magic because magic had become her daily reality. The traces we left would outlast us. The trees would grow around and through the structures Marcus had built, incorporating them into the forest itself. Our story would become legend, whispered by future generations who stumbled upon the remains of impossible homes hidden in impossible places. But for now, in this moment, with the last light of day fading into the soft darkness of a forest night, all that mattered was this: my hand in Marcus's hand, Sophie's laughter floating through the trees, the smell of pine and wildflowers and wood smoke, the sound of owls beginning their nightly conversation, the feeling of absolute, unshakable peace. We had built a life that most people would never believe was possible, and we had done it together, one day at a time, one choice at a time, one act of faith at a time. That is the story I wanted to tell you. Not a story about danger, although there was danger. Not a story about escape, although there was escape. A story about what happens when you stop running from the darkness and start building something in the light. Marcus often says that the strongest homes are not made from the hardest materials. They are made from the deepest love. I believe him. I believe him because I live in that home every single day. If you are still with me after all these words, after all these hours, after all these chapters of our impossible life, then you are part of our family now too. You have walked with us through fear and transformation, through danger and peace, through the building of a home that the world said could not exist. Thank you for being here. Thank you for believing. Thank you for proving that some stories are still worth telling and some hearts are still open enough to hear them. Until we meet again, may your own forests reveal their secrets. May your own trees offer shelter. May your own impossible dreams turn out to be merely improbable, waiting for someone brave enough to make them true. 5 years have passed since I fled Chicago in a rainstorm with my daughter in my arms. 5 years since I called a number on a white card and set in motion the most unlikely journey of my life. 5 years of building, growing, loving, and becoming someone I never imagined I could be. Sophie is 12 now. Tall, for her age, with her father's dark eyes and my stubborn chin, and something entirely her own in the way she moves through the world. She is confident in ways I never was at her age, capable, curious, unafraid of the shadows, because she has learned that darkness is just the absence of light, not the presence of something to fear. She has friends now, children of the network of families Marcus has carefully cultivated in the surrounding region. Homeschooling families, off-grid families, people who have chosen similar paths for their own reasons. She meets them for lessons and adventures, forming bonds that span miles of forest and years of shared experience. Marcus and I have grown too, in ways both expected and surprising. The love between us has deepened into something I can only describe as bedrock, not the passionate urgency of our early days, though that still flares up often enough. Something more fundamental, an understanding so complete that we often know each other's thoughts before they are spoken. A partnership so equal that neither of us could say where one ends and the other begins. His health has been good, though the old wounds from that night in the hospital sometimes trouble him when the weather turns cold. I have become adept at the medicine of the forest, combining my nursing knowledge with the natural remedies Marcus learned during his years of solitary living. Together, we have become healers in our own right, helping the families of our network through illnesses and injuries that would otherwise require dangerous trips to distant hospitals. Our property has grown too. What started as a single treehouse has become a small compound of hidden structures scattered through the forest in a pattern only we can navigate. The original oak remains our heart, the place where we gather for meals and conversations and family time. But we have a guest house now for visitors, a school building where Sophie leads lessons for younger children, a workshop, where Marcus creates increasingly complex and beautiful objects from wood and stone. We are not wealthy by the standards of the world. We have no bank accounts, no investments, no properties registered in our names, but we are rich beyond measure, rich in time, rich in peace, rich in the freedom to live exactly as we choose. Sometimes I think about my old life, the one I left behind when I climbed into that black sedan in the rain, the hospital where I worked myself to exhaustion for wages that never quite covered the bills, the apartment where I lay awake at night listening to sirens and worrying about Sophie's future, the endless grinding fear of a world that seemed designed to crush people like me. I do not miss it, not even a little. This morning I woke before dawn and climbed to the observation platform to watch the sun rise. Marcus found me there an hour later, bringing coffee in the ceramic mugs I made in my pottery studio. "What are you thinking about?" he asked, settling beside me on the bench. "Everything," I replied. "Nothing. The life we have built. The miracle of waking up without fear." He put his arm around me and we sat in comfortable silence as the sky brightened from black to purple to pink to gold. "I have been thinking about the future," he said eventually, "about what happens when Sophie grows up, when she wants to explore the wider world." I nodded. We had discussed this before. Sophie was curious about the life beyond our forest, the cities and cultures, and technologies that our deliberate isolation kept at bay. "She will go when she is ready," I said, "and she will come back when she chooses. That is what we raised her for. Not to be trapped here, but to be rooted here, to have a home she can always return to." "And us?" Marcus asked. "What happens to us when she goes?" I turned to look at him, at this man who had built an impossible life from nothing but his own hands, and his desperate hope for something better. The same thing that has always Happened, I said. We keep building. We keep growing. We keep loving each other and this place we have created together. He smiled, and I saw in his eyes the same wonder I felt every morning when I woke up in our home in the trees. I never believed in happy endings, he admitted. I thought they were lies people told themselves to make the darkness bearable. But this, what we have here, it feels like more than an ending. It feels like a beginning that never stops beginning. I kissed him, tasting coffee and morning air and the inexhaustible sweetness of shared life. That is because it is, I said. Every day we wake up here is another chapter. Every sunrise is another page. The story never ends, Marcus. It just keeps getting better. Below us, I heard Sophie's voice calling out a greeting to the chickens as she began her morning chores. Birds sang in the branches around us. Wind rustled through leaves that would turn gold again in a few months, marking another year in our impossible, beautiful life, leaving no trace. That was the dream Marcus started with when he walked away from everything he knew and built a home in the hollow of an ancient oak. But we have left traces everywhere now. Traces of love, traces of hope, traces of a life that proves the impossible is only impossible until someone is brave enough to try. If you are still here, still listening, still believing in the power of stories to transform and heal and inspire, then you carry a trace of our story with you. Now, it lives in your heart, a seed waiting to bloom into whatever dreams you dare to dream. That is the real magic of storytelling. Not the events we describe, not the characters we create, the way stories plant themselves in the fertile ground of imagination and grow into something new with every listener who receives them. Go now. Build your impossible life. Find your person who will carve a home from living wood for you. Discover the forest that has always been waiting for you to enter. Leave traces that matter. And if you ever find yourself lost in the dark, remember this story. Remember that even mafia bosses can learn to love. Remember that even ancient trees can become homes. Remember that even the most hopeless situations can transform into the most beautiful beginnings. That is what we learned in our treehouse in the forest. That is what we hope you will learn from our story. Thank you for being here. Thank you for believing. Now go. Your impossible life is waiting.